Welcome to Fans of the Forge. I'm Chris. To my left we have...
Teresa.
And the wrap-up episode for tonight is for Season 5, Episode 4, Jumonji Yari. Our contestants in this episode were Fuad with 20 years of part-time experience, Jacob with 5 years of part-time experience, and he was only 19 years old at the time.
Impressive.
Kyle, who had 20 years of part-time experience, and then Greg, who had 2 years of full-time experience. Sean and I both chose Fuad to win.
Yeah.
Seems like a pretty reasonable pick.
Yeah.
20 years experience, pretty solid.
Right.
Teresa and I chose Jacob as our underdog pick. Again,
Right.
yeah, why not?
Right.
And then Sean chose Greg to win as the underdog, excuse me, and Teresa chose Greg to win. So, round 1.
All right.
We go in, and they are required to make friction folders using a piece of 5160 steel. So, this was earlier on in the season before they really started to go overboard with the crazy materials that they had to do.
Yeah.
So, this was just a solid bar of 5160, and they were told they had to make friction folders, but they were not told any of the tests that they were going to have to do with the friction folders if they were to make it to the end of round 2.
Right.
So that kind of, I mean, it affects it a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
It affects how you do your design. You want to make sure you're hitting all the key points for a test like that, like making a blade that's strong enough and sharp enough. Obviously, you need that for all of them, but your design they probably beefed up their designs more than maybe they would have normally if they knew what the tests were going to be.
Right. You're not just making a little pocket knife.
Right. Right.
You knowing the test would help you determine how big you're going to make this thing.
Right.
How heavy it'll be and all that stuff. But they didn't tell them, so.
So they went to work from there, and Fuad came in and had his time just planned out to the T.
It was pretty good. He's like,
Yeah.
this hour I'm going to do this. By the second hour I'm doing that.
He knew what he was
Had
going
a
to
plan.
do.
It was a good plan.
His experience really showed through here. The only other thing we noted with his was that at one point he picked up his blade and was whacking the spine because it was starting to go in the wrong direction as he was working on it. And by whacking it down on the anvil, it was actually helping to straighten it out. And that's a method that Jay Nielsen was like, hey, that's actually a pretty solid method to do that. That makes the most sense to fix it that way.
It's a spine whacker, I think.
A spine whacker?
Fuad, I think, may have said that about himself.
Yes, a spine whacker.
I don't know.
Anyway.
Funny.
So, Jacob, he added a decorative twist to his tang as he was going through his process.
I kind of questioned that as soon as he did it. I was like, well,
yeah, what's the point?
You got that tang's got to go into the part of the handle.
Right, so
it folds.
Jay Nielsen said that as long as he ground it flat on the sides, it should still be okay. But then that kind of takes away from the decorative aspect of it. Plus, it's going to be within the handle once you actually go to use it, so you're not really going to be seeing it anymore. And this could cause an issue when it is in the handle when you're trying to hold this thing. You might make it a little weird, like where you're gripping on the part. Right. So whatever, to each his own. It was a neat little twist. I did like it.
Oh, neat little twist. Good one, Chris.
Greg, he had a bare leg, aka a bare leg, and Sean pointed out they made this joke early on.
He had a bear tattooed on his calf. Big bear head.
A big bear head. And
he's wearing shorts.
Who made the joke? Doug?
Was it Doug? Between Doug and Dave.
Yeah, one of them said, "Look, he's got a bare leg," and then
you like staring at his bare leg or something like that.
Yeah, and then it was a few minutes later when Will Willis comes in and goes, "Oh,
bare leg!"
Bare
leg. I get it. Whoa, right over his head, man.
Can't win them all, Will. Can't win them all. So.
Oh, good quote by Greg here.
Yes.
Right. I don't know if you can read my.
You can read it.
Okay.
You can read it.
Don't hold on to mistakes just because you spent time making them. That's pretty good.
That's deep right there.
Yeah, that's a pretty good life
thought.
lesson, life point, some whatever.
Yeah.
Take that with you.
I'm going to reflect on that one later tonight.
Ponder on that.
Yeah. Give it a good chunk of my thought power tonight. So, next, Kyle. He seemed that like he was just having some troubles the whole time. He
lost a little steam.
Yeah, he lost steam as he was going. He was getting very tired. His arm was getting tired. He had trouble just keeping a good grip on his hammers, and to the point where he ended up grabbing one of the smaller hammers.
Yeah, a small ball peen hammer.
Yeah, to do some of this.
And Nielsen's like, that's not gonna help you out.
No,
you're not moving metal with that thing.
And then he also had trouble
straightening his blade.
Oh yeah, straightening the blade out. So wasn't looking so good for Kyle at that point. And leading into the judging, Greg had a slight warp that could have been an issue from a hot quench, because he quenched his really extremely hot. Like it was, the whole thing was glowing.
Yeah,
like to the point of
bright.
It was a little too hot,
and it's a little lean too.
Which was probably why it got so hot. It was super thin. It took a lot of heat and took on a warp. I mean, it was warping before he even did the heat treating. That he was having issues with the warp, and then he had to straighten it before he even did the quench. So Kyle's had a slight twist. Jacob's had a small ricasso, and that left very little room for a pin for the friction folder aspect of it, where it had to be able to fold it out into position. He didn't have much space left there for a pin.
Wherever that pin is, you got like a 1/4 inch on either side of it, and
it's a weak spot.
Creates a weak spot.
Yeah. Fuad came in and was just like the glowing child here, getting all the compliments. It was a great looking blade, which it was. I mean,
that thing was.
The thing looked awesome for 3 hours.
Shined up.
Like amazing. It was really amazing what he was able to do in 3 hours compared to the rest of the guys there. Because of Kyle's blade being so badly warped to the point where it was a corkscrew-ish almost warp. It was going in 3 different directions. Kyle ended up getting the boot. Didn't really affect our picks. None of us picked him to win. Sorry, Kyle, but we move on to round 2.
Okay, round 2. Handle time.
Handles, yes.
So, Fuad decided to do a differential heat treat to make some parts harder than the others. I think he was complimented on that too.
Yeah.
Drake had some issues with alignment, and he started his handle over at one point. And then his pin was too small. He had some issues with his pin.
Oh, wait, was his too small? I do remember Fuad had an issue where his pin was too big, and then he stuck it in the drill press and ran the drill press and then used the grinding sandpaper. Yeah. And then, wouldn't you know it, like right after that, Jacob saw what he was doing and did the same thing. Right. So maybe his was too big, and then he went and ground it down on there. I don't know if he maybe made it a little too small after
maybe
that.
Maybe the pinhole was too, I don't know.
Yeah, something was a little
My notes are
off.
a little incomplete. Whatever. There was a problem with the pin.
Yeah.
But he got it worked out.
Yes.
Okay. And then we moved to Greg, who he had to peen all of his pins in his handle because it was too tight of a fit. He couldn't pull it back apart in order to epoxy the thing, so he just had to peen them all.
Yep.
So then we move on to testing. We have the sharpness test, which was a ham slice. Took a pork shoulder. It's hanging by the 4 cables. And they all pass and cut the ham up pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty simple test. Like if you can't pass that,
it's hard
one.
not to do well in that. I mean, you really have to have a dull blade. Do you remember Fuad did maybe a little bit better than the others, because I believe Doug really commented, he's like, wow, this thing really cuts.
Yeah.
It's like
just
ham anyone or something like that.
Just sliced right through.
Yeah. Then we move on to the strength test, which was a bamboo chop. It was going to be hacking into bamboo 10 times by Nielsen there. They all did okay, but Greg took some edge damage, had some rolls, and because of that, Greg got the boot.
And that means your underdog pick
is gone.
and Teresa's main pick.
Right. So
out of running with that. So that leaves Fuad and Jacob. That also means I'm getting points, motherfuckers, because
bastard.
I have both my picks are in the finals. So the weapon that they had to recreate was the Jumonji Yari. It was a 1500s Japanese weapon. It was a peasant weapon for peasant foot soldiers, I believe, used it. And a double-edged crossbars to pull samurai from horses. They needed to have 3 blades in a cruciform shape. And with the shaft, the whole thing had to be between 6'8" and 6'10".
it's kind of a weird parameter. Between 6'8" and 6'10".
Yeah,
not like 6'1" and 6'10". 6'8" is just 2 inches.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the history on this weapon, right? So I don't know if I don't think that every single Jumonji Yari ever made was within those
between
parameters.
6'8" and 6'10".
I mean, it probably varied per person that was going to be using it, you would think. Like maybe they would have a weapon that was a little shorter if they were a smaller person, or for maybe this case, maybe it was a little, well, no, you'd probably go a little shorter for ease of use, right? And control of the weapon.
Yeah.
You'd want it to match your frame somewhat. So who knows how they pick the parameters here. And the only other parameter they had was they needed to have a pointed butt cap. Jake, he came into the competition at his home forge. He didn't have any power hammer or press.
Nope.
He was using 2 torches plus his forge for his heat treating.
Right. He had these 2 torches going to get all the components hot.
It's just because it wouldn't fit. Because when you had the side blades bent out, it just couldn't get all of it into the forge that he had.
He gets a warp twice.
Oh, that's
2
right.
different times he gets a warp in that thing. But, he fixed it.
Yeah. So Fuad, he chose a different method here. He went with a 2-piece construction. So he had the main straight blade that came off the shaft and then the 2 side blades that were part of one thing that he would then attach after the fact. And he grabbed a rake pole and a steel sleeve was added to the end with a little extra piece. He had some issues with his length originally. It was a good.
Well, the pole by
inches.
itself, it just wasn't long enough.
Yeah, it just wasn't long enough, so he had to add an extension. Now, we'll get into this a little bit more, actually. Let's skip this. So he had to add an extension to his, and they both added their own little flare details.
Right.
So
Yep.
Jake added Forge and Fire. He wrote that in Japanese.
His first time writing in Japanese.
Yeah.
So I wonder.
Did he do like a Google Translate or something and then just write it down? Like, is it going to be like one of those tattoos
Japanese
that people
tattoos.
get?
Yeah, you think it says something, but it doesn't say that. Yeah, 'cause it doesn't translate that way.
Yeah.
So, but he went for it, and okay.
Yeah, it looked good. And then Fuad etched a very nice flower detail design into his.
Yeah, it was nice.
So, they come in for the kill test. You want to cover the kill test here, Sean?
Kill test. Pig carcass. Once again, the famed pig carcass appears, and Doug's student comes in to complete the test. We've seen this guy a couple times before.
Unnamed. RJ gets the call out for the full name because he's Doug's brother.
I think Doug has mentioned this guy's name before, but he didn't this time. For whatever reason. We don't know. Okay. Anyway. All right. So Fuad's up first. They're doing the stab, the slash, the whole deal there. And so the guy brings it up, does this upward cut, and then whack, like the blade just comes. It doesn't like fall off the handle, but it just breaks.
The handle cracked like right just above that where it was being held.
Right.
And so catastrophic failure, and then basically Jacob just had to pass the test without breaking.
Yeah,
which he did.
There's a sad Doug cam, I think, for the
yes,
break.
There was a sad Doug cam. So with that, because it was a catastrophic failure, Jacob won.
Jacob wins.
So that means Teresa and I both got some points here. But before we go into the points, now we're going to introduce a special call-in guest. Actually,
what?
Huh? What? I actually talked to Fuad earlier today, and we had a little conversation to talk about what happened with his blades. So here's that audio now. Now on the line, I have Fuad Accawi from the Jumonji Yari episode. So welcome, Fuad.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
So I did want to say I was really impressed with the work that you did on that episode. Like during the first few challenges there, you really your experience showed through well, and it was I don't know if you've watched any of the episodes that we've put out there before, but we've been making picks before we watch the show and decide who we think's going to win. And I did have you chosen as my pick for this episode.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, everything was well in hand. The first and second challenge actually were really easy. I didn't have any trouble with it at all.
Yeah, and it was really impressive. And so, I was excited to see you get through to the final round. And the weapon they had you making was definitely an interesting choice. So you mentioned that you spent a number of hours doing research on the Jumonji Yari as you were going through the process of designing it and building it.
Yes, I didn't know anything about this pole weapon, and I'm a knife maker and a sword maker, so a pole weapon is something I would never be interested in making at all. So I had to research the thing, and I found that it needed a really long tang going into the shaft, and how you would attach it, and kind of sizes and proportions for everything. And my goal was to make something historically accurate and have dimensions and be able to be used as the weapon would have been used with a ranged sliding hand technique. So that is what I built for, and I put everything into it, everything I had.
And it really showed. I mean, it was a great looking weapon, and I know that the show itself, they kind of focused. They always seem to do this with a lot of the different challenges. They focus on one thing that could possibly have gone wrong, and then they really kind of highlight that. And so they focused a lot on the handle that you were putting onto your weapon, and they didn't really say a whole lot else about the blade aspect that you put on there. And they just kind of, I kind of like to call it manufactured drama. It seems like they do that a lot. They say, oh no, it's going to warp, and then it doesn't warp, and that's how the show goes.
Yeah, it was. I was disappointed because in the forging of the head of that thing, there was so much complex forging, but I felt like they have to give the cat a string to move to keep their attention, and the fact that handle snapped the way it did. After the fact, they know they have to give a poor hint that I'm going to have a problem. So they spent a lot of time talking about how I added, a foot to the bottom of the shaft, but that was the spike basically. I added a foot on the spike,
right?
And it was a super, super strong joint. and it really didn't enter into it, but the whole aspect of the shaft being too short leads people in the direction, mentally that, the guy's got a problem with his shaft, which I was 100% with the shaft. So
right.
I didn't have any concerns about it at all.
So then it must have been a surprise then when they do take the first swing and it snapped.
Yeah.
So what exactly happened there? Was it something to do with the way the tang was in the shaft, or at that particular spot? It looked like it broke right where he was holding it.
It broke, in front of his hand, and it didn't have anything to do with the tang. It was a foot away from the tang, down into the meat of the shaft. I mean, just clear ash wood. I probably, if I was testing myself, I probably wouldn't have led with the most destructive test that you could have done against the shaft, which is just trying to, basically, you're trying to break the shaft when you're trying to cut a 50 or 75 pound pig that's going to be stationary with an underhanded leverage punch where you're putting power behind it into inch and a quarter shaft. I mean, that is the most destructive test you can do, and I don't know why they led with that. I don't know what their plan was. I mean, it's a ranged weapon. You would let the weapon, as far as what I understand about it, and what some other martial artist guys have told me after the fact, is that you use it at length. You use a sliding hand technique, where you spin and you can use your palm to slide through the cuts and let the weapon's weight do the work. And underhanded punch through a pig at 3 feet is not probably, the first test you would want to lead with. But again, I was really disappointed. Doug was on the bench for that.
Yeah.
I feel like he would have done it differently. And nobody goes on the show to have some knucklehead do their blade test. You go to have Doug or one of the other guys do it. Not this karate guy, which I don't know what his experience was, but as far as what I understood about how these weapons were used, that was kind of off-label to use it like you're Paul Bunyan trying to cut a tree in one whack,
Yeah, it definitely seems like the design of the weapon and the way that it was probably used in historical purposes was not that particular type of strike. So
not like an axe.
Exactly.
So, okay, it was a thing, and I don't know.
So, were you able to take the pole weapon back home with you after that?
Oh yeah, I've got it. I put a nice ash bow staff from Hanway on it, and I mean it's a straight grain piece of ash wood. That's exactly the same size that I had made the other shaft. So it's hanging on my wall now with a reproduction of my friction folder and the broken piece of shaft there. Underneath it is a nice display. So and the fact is that I'd even talked to my wife before I went to the final competition, and I told her I wanted to keep the thing. That was something that was eating at me because I really, really loved it, and it was a beautiful piece of work. And I told my wife, Gina, that what would you think if I would just forego, if I did win, if I forego the prize money and tell them I want to keep my pieces that I made? And she said, well, I don't care. That's fine with me. So I found out after the fact that I was going to get to keep it because I didn't know they were doing that, in our season.
Right.
So, and I talked to one of the guys on the show, and he said, yeah, if you'd have won, there's no way you could have kept it. This is the only way you could have kept it. So again, the universe answered a question that I wish that it hadn't. Could I keep my weapon? Well, yes. The only way that I could keep it was for that exact thing to happen. Something that that didn't have anything to do with my metalwork or anything broke that's easily replaceable, and now, yeah, I got my wish. I got my Yari, and it's hanging on my living room wall now.
Oh, that's cool. That's great. I mean, it's interesting how that happens sometimes.
Kind of worked out. And listen, the other thing is that kid Jacob.
Yes.
He's a super, super good kid, and we're going to spend some time together at my forge, and he wants to use my power hammer and my equipment and see how to do that stuff, and he's going to come up at the end of the summer when it starts to cool off here in Tennessee. And the thing is, the whole thing wasn't about the money for me. I didn't give a shit about the money.
Right.
Sorry, I don't know. You might have to bleep me, but
don't worry about that. We swear on our show too, so it's.
So I didn't care about the money. It never entered into it. It was all about showing what I could do. And Jacob needed the money, and I am glad he got it because I've never seen somebody work as hard as him, and he's young and he's starting out in life, and I totally don't begrudge him of that. It didn't have anything to do with what Jacob did or whatever on the show, and I'm glad that somebody that could really benefit from that won. And I guess that's all I've got to say about that.
Well, Fuad, thank you for calling me and talking about that with me. It's great to hear, the contestants' point of view when it comes to this. A lot of times, because so much is left off the table when they do the episode and actually put it out there. They can only fit so much into an hour long, 44 minutes really with commercials. So, we are excited and happy to talk to all these contestants. So thank you for your time. And, maybe down the line we could have you on for a longer interview with the whole group and get into some more information about bladesmithing in general, if you like.
Whatever I can do, I'm willing to do whatever I can to help out or anything I can do for you, Chris.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks again for calling, and I'll let you know as soon as the episode goes up.
That's fantastic. Thanks, man.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was interesting.
Oh, wow.
It was a really interesting interview to kind of get his point of view on how that happened. And, the piece of ash that he used, it should have been fine, but he really thought it was more of an issue with the way they were testing it. And if they had done the test a little differently, it might not have broken the way that it did. Like, that seemed like kind of an overkill test to be the first one that you do with that sort of weapon.
Yeah, and I don't know. Would an overhand kind of diagonal slash have done differently?
I don't know.
Perhaps.
It's hard to say because it did break right at the guy's hand, which would have been like a stress point when you're going to do that hit no matter what. But maybe if it was swung like it is meant to be swung, he would have been holding it farther down. So maybe it would have been less likely to break if it was held that way. It's really it's hard to tell.
Hard to tell.
And Fuad was a good sport about it, and you heard what he said. He was glad Jacob won, and they're even going to be working together this summer at some point.
And Fuad's got his weapon back.
Yeah, and Fuad's got his weapon, and he's repaired it, and it's mounted up in his living room with the broken handle and some other stuff. So, you know what? I think this was a great way to kind of end this episode was with getting a hold of Fuad to talk about this, because it really just highlights some of the information that we don't normally get from an episode, right? Like, there's so much stuff going on behind the scenes that we would never find out, and now we're starting to get this kind of weird access to contestants that want to talk to us about this. So thank you, Fuad, for allowing us to have that little conversation. And
Fuad, I was so confident Fuad was going to win this.
Yeah.
I mean, everything he did from the first couple of rounds, smooth sailing, right?
Yeah.
And he said it too, and it just came together. Final round looked good. Blade looked great. And then I'm watching it. I'm like, Fucking rake handle? Like, you chose a rake handle? Oh, come on, man. I mean, look at that thing. You used a rake handle? But
it's a solid piece of wood.
Hey.
I mean, what's the difference?
But hey, man, it all worked out in the end. He's happy for Jake.
Yep.
You know, he doesn't need the money. His wife said, "I don't need the money. I don't give a shit. Like, whatever. Bring that blade back home. I don't need that. Whatever. Hang it up." And he hung it up, and it's looking good. He's happy. Jake's happy. We're happy. Everybody's happy.
Yeah, that's what matters. So, the only thing that matters more than that
is you being a subscriber on YouTube
and liking our videos and following us on Instagram, but also our points for this episode.
Oh, shit. That's right.
Teresa and I had Jacob as our underdog.
You got
picks.
lucky. You guys got lucky.
You got lucky. So that was 2 points each. So the new total, 17 for Teresa, 15 for myself, 10 for Sean. We're going to keep putting these out during the break between seasons. You know that for sure. We got people that want to get interviewed. We've got more contestants lined up. We have 2 more interviews lined up, potentially.
You know.
And I feel like the more we keep doing them, the more people are going to want to talk to us. So thanks everybody involved in the bladesmithing community for giving us your time to listen to our show and to talk with us about the show and all of that good stuff. Remember to subscribe, like our videos, check out our social media, and
buy Jason Knight's shirts.
Oh, be a maker.
Sale. Be a maker.
Not a taker.
Not a taker.
The new design is up on his store. I believe it's bonfire.com.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. If you go on there, or if you go to Jason Knight Knives, you could probably find a link to his new shirt, which is a really cool design.
It's kind of funny, yeah.
It's got some animals doing some forging.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. So check that out. And I just realized we didn't do this for the last episode, but we had talked about doing our featured forge of the week. So we'll do a teaser. The featured forge of the week is the Volunteer Forge, who was a contestant on the show, and he's going to be an interview for us next week sometime.
Very nice.
Keep an eye out for that one, and I'll flip through his Instagram and post some stuff on the green screen behind us. So thanks everybody for watching, and we will talk to you next week.
What?
Huh? What?
Wait, what? Huh? What? Wait, what? Huh? What? Wait, what? Huh? What? Wait, what? Huh? What?
I do?
Yeah. There it is. It's good.
What?
I don't know.